In a remote period of American history, there was among the high hills, not far from Tarrytown, a drowsy little Dutch settlement, long known as Sleepy Hollow. There are some who say that this enchanted region was bewitched by a high German doctor. Others say that an Indian wizard held his powwows here. Certain it is that some power held a spell over the minds of the good people. The whole neighborhood abounds with local tales of haunted spots and twilight superstitions, and the most fearsome spirit of all, the Headless Horseman. Now it happened that a very peculiar school teacher came to Sleepy Hollow. His name was Ichabod Crane. And to see him striding along with his tattered clothes fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for the specter of famine descending upon the earth. His schoolhouse on a crisp winter day buzzed with the low murmur of his pupils' voices, interrupted now and then by the authoritative voice of the master, accompanied by the crack of a birch stick. Ichabod's scholars were not spoiled, and all of this he called doing his duty. He was not, as you may have imagined, one of those cruel potentates of the school who joy in the smarting of his subjects. He administered justice with discrimination rather than severity. When school hours were over, he would often walk a student home, especially the ones who had mothers who were noted for the comforts of the cupboard. Knowing that his rustic patrons were apt to consider schoolmasters as mere drones, he would often render himself useful and agreeable. Then, late at night, sitting by the fire, he listened to old Dutch wives' tales of ghosts, goblins, and haunted fields. Especially the tale of the Headless Horseman. While listening, all snug by the chimney, Ichabod was only mildly apprehensive. But afterwards, on his walk homeward, what fearful shapes and shadows beset his path. Among Ichabod's musical disciples was Katrina van Tassel, the daughter and only heir of a substantial Dutch farmer. On his way to her house, Ichabod rolled his great eyes over her father's fat meadowlands. In his devouring mind's eye, he pictured to himself every duck roasted succulent brown, each little porker with an apple in its mouth, strutting turkeys on plates swimming in gravy. How he sighed and yearned for the blooming Katrina van Tassel, who would inherit all these domains.
Hear our voices joyously sing this verse.
Ichabod's most formidable rival was Brom Bones, who was the hero of the countryside and Katrina's suitor.
Take the spear of hope and cheer and banish all your woes.
Ichabod loved to watch her tender face form sweet round vowels. Brom fumed with jealousy, but he knew he could not regain Katrina's affections by physically assaulting an obviously weaker opponent. So he employed his natural inclination for fun and mischief.
Sweetly sing this
Katrina sent Brom away. Brom left, but he vowed revenge. Ichabod rejoiced. Katrina had brushed aside the main impediment to his pursuit of her affections. Some time later, Ichabod was handed a note. An invitation to attend a party at the Van Tassel mansion. Ichabod imagined himself in the true style of a cavalier. He saw an admiring Van Tassel bestowing upon him his total wealth. He was certain that tonight he would win the heiress' hand. Ichabod, gallantly mounted on a borrowed steed, lurched along toward the Van Tassel estate. When he entered, the conquest of his heart was complete. A world of charms burst upon his enraptured gaze. Not those of the bevy of buxom lasses, but the ample charms of a genuine Dutch country table. Ichabod was a peculiar creature whose spirits rose with eating, as some men's do with drink. Ichabod prided himself on his dancing as much as on his vocal powers. Not a limb nor a fiber about him was idle. To see his loosely hung frame in full motion, clattering about the room, you would think St. Vitus himself was whirling before you in person. He was the admiration of all present, except Brom Bones. When the dance was at an end, Ichabod was attracted to a group of older folks who sat and doled out their wild and wonderful legends. Many dismal tales were told about funeral trains and cries and wailings. Some mention was made of the woman in white who haunted the dark glen at Raven Rock. She was often heard to shriek on winter nights before a storm. Seeing Ichabod trembling in every limb, Brom Bones immediately added a tale of his own, an encounter with their favorite specter, the headless horseman of Sleepy Hollow. He affirmed that returning one night from a neighboring village, he had been overtaken by the midnight trooper himself. He raced home, and just as they came to the church bridge, the headless horseman bolted and vanished in a flash of fire. To Brom's satisfaction and delight, Ichabod was terror-stricken. Ichabod lingered behind, according to the custom of country lovers, fully convinced that he had won Katrina's heart. What passed between them, no one knows. But something went wrong. Was her encouragement of the poor pedagogue all a mere sham to secure her conquest of his rival? Ichabod, heavy-hearted and crestfallen, pursued his way homeward. It was the witching hour. All the stories of ghosts and goblins now came crowding upon his recollections. The night grew darker and darker. He had never felt so lonely and dismal. He was, moreover, approaching the very place where many of the scenes of the ghost stories had been laid. Suddenly, a strange sound caught the sensitive ear of Ichabod. In the dark shadow of the grove, he beheld a huge, misshapen, black towering mass, like some gigantic monster ready to spring upon him. Ichabod burst forth into a fervent psalm tune.
Hear our voices joyously sing this fervent psalm.
Ichabod was momentarily relieved until he cautiously opened one eye and spied a horseman of large dimensions trotting alongside. Ichabod was never again seen in that region. Many stories were called to mind and considered and compared. But in the end, the old Dutch wives, who are the best judges in these matters, maintained that Ichabod was spirited away by the headless horseman. And to this day, it is a favorite story often told about the neighborhood.
Once upon a time, a beautiful little girl was born to a poor man and his wife. A wise old woman in the village saw the baby and said,
"This child is specially blessed. She will always be lucky, and when she is 18, she will be queen of the land."
It happened that the real queen heard about the prophecy.
I am the queen. There can be no other.
Then she put on a disguise and went to the poor man and his wife and said in a friendly way,
Give me your child, and I will raise her with great care.
The queen offered them a bag of gold, and the poor parents gave up their luck child, believing that no real harm could ever come to her.
Good riddance.
The baby floated gently down the river to a mill. The good miller and his wife were delighted with the little girl and raised her as their own daughter. She was a kind, clever child, and they blessed the day that they found her. 18 years later, the queen was traveling to a great ball in the next kingdom when a thunderstorm broke loose, forcing her to take shelter in a nearby mill. The miller and his wife were honored to have the queen in their house, and they had their adopted child serve her tea.
Is this lovely girl your daughter?
We think of her as our daughter, even though she is not our own. 18 years ago, I pulled her from the water when she was only a baby.
What?
At once, the queen realized that this was the very child whom she thought she drowned, and she wanted to get rid of the girl.
Could your daughter take a letter to the king for me?
It would be our honor. Dear King, she wrote, when this young woman arrives at the castle, kill her at once, for she is a wicked witch from your queen. The journey was long, and when darkness fell, the girl became lost in the forest. After many hours of wandering, she saw a light in the house. She knocked at the door, and an old woman opened it.
This is a robber's house. Go away before they come home and do you harm.
I must deliver a letter to the king. I'm lost and tired. Please help me.
The old woman was curious about the letter, so she took the girl in and fed her and put her to bed. When the robbers returned, at first they were angry with the old woman. Then they too became curious about the letter. They opened it and read it. That queen is tricking this young woman. Let's fix the mean old thing. The leader sat down and wrote another letter. Dear King, when this young woman arrives at the castle, marry her to our son. Do not wait for my return. From your queen. The leader burned the first letter and put the second in its place as the young woman slept. In the morning, she thanked her hosts and left for the castle, where she delivered the robber's letter. The king thought it strange that the queen would not want to be at the prince's wedding, but she must have her reasons, he thought, and he had the marriage performed. When the queen returned, she saw that her plan had gone wrong, and she decided to get rid of the new princess in some other way.
You must prove to me that you truly love my son. Go find the devil and bring back 3 golden hairs from his beard.
The princess took a horse and wagon and started out. Soon she came to a town where the guard asked her, "Who are you and what do you know?"
I know everything.
Then tell me why our fountain, which used to pour forth red wine, now doesn't even give water.
I shall tell you when I return.
In the next town, the guard asked her, "Who are you and what do you know?"
I know everything.
Then tell me why our apple tree, which used to bear golden apples, now doesn't even have leaves.
I shall tell you when I return.
At last she came to a river and asked a ferryman to take her across. "Who are you and what do you know?"
I know everything.
Then tell me why I must ferry back and forth, and never be relieved.
I shall tell you when I return.
After a while, she came to the devil's house. He was not at home, but his grandmother greeted her.
You are so young and beautiful. Go away or the devil will harm you.
I have come to get 3 golden hairs from his beard, and I have 3 questions to ask.
She told her questions to the old woman.
In that case, stay. But I shall have to use my magic to hide you from the devil.
She thought for a moment and then changed the princess into an owl.
Now just sit here and keep your ears open.
The devil came home and had a big meal. As usual, he sat down to drink some wine and listen to his grandmother's tales. They made him sleepy. Soon, he began to snore. What is it?
I dreamed about a fountain. It used to give red wine, but not anymore. Why?
Because a frog sits at the bottom of the fountain. Oh! What is it?
I dreamed about an apple tree. It used to bear golden apples, but not anymore. Why?
Because a mouse is eating one of its roots. No! What is it now?
I dreamed about a ferryman. He goes back and forth, and no one ever relieves him. What should he do?
Give the oar to the next passenger and run. Now leave me alone or I'll... In the morning, when the devil had left, the grandmother turned the owl back to a young princess and gave her the 3 golden hairs.
Leave quickly. You have the answers.
After the ferryman had taken the young woman across the river, she said,
Give your next passenger the oar and run.
at the town with the apple tree, she told the people the answer to their question. At the town with the fountain, she told the people the answer to their question. And the people from each town gave her a sack of gold. So the lucky princess returned home not only with the 3 golden hairs from the devil, but also with 2 sacks of gold. The prince was delighted to see his bride. She gave the 3 golden hairs to the queen, who was still determined to get rid of the young woman. But at the moment, she was more interested in the gold, for she was very greedy.
Where did you get all that gold, dear?
Oh, I crossed the river on a ferry. On the farther shore, gold lies like sand. I scooped this up.
Can I get some too?
As much as you like. Just take the ferry.
No time to waste. Row me across the river, quickly.
The ferryman took her to the other shore, then placed the oar in her hand and ran away. And there the queen has been condemned to row back and forth, ever since. So, since the old queen had disappeared, things happened just as the wise old village woman had predicted 18 years before. The good luck child became queen. She was just and generous to her people, and they loved her. The old queen had been hated by everyone. No one missed her at all, and no one ever tried to find out what had become of her.